What would be the advice to a 20-something-year-old?
It wasn't really going to be about net worth in my 20s. It was going to be about my network.
Why do you think these components are crucial to someone in their 20s?
So the mistake some people make is they think education happens in a classroom.
Do you have to have knowledge first to get money, or money first and to get knowledge?
The 20s is build your mind.
What are some things that helped you out a lot?
If you grow money, but you don't grow your knowledge, then ultimately you might not be able to keep that money.
You know, you've got a son who's getting close to turning 20.
Mm-hmm.
What is something that someone can do to take advantage of their 20s and grow wealth or be on the path to growing wealth?
Just had this conversation with him 2 nights ago. We're just sitting in the mud room as he's putting on his shoes. And I was like, hey, man, next phase, you're going to have a certain skill set that if you could really develop, it'll be a game changer. And if you develop that skill, it's going to apply to all areas of life and give you more choice with your career. Like, this is, I think, the thing I did most right in my 20s.
Okay.
I really bought into my network.
Okay.
I mean, I grew up in a little coal mining town, right? And so I didn't have like major connections. Although, let me just say about my coal mining town, people like really helped me out. I started a business at 15. I had a teacher, Terry Tubbs, that helped me to, get into business competitions. Patty Rigby helped me to learn how to do income statements and balance sheets. Like, it was just a town where people invested in me. And it was really cool to have that kind of rural community that was really there for me. Even when I got in this thing, Governor's Honors Academy, people were contributing because you had to go kind of like ask for money for the sponsorships. And it was just really cool that they like stepped up and were willing to contribute. But I didn't really have like this robust network. I didn't have a financial network. I didn't have like a business network. And so I really, from the time I was 20 years old, the first thing I did was I took 50% of all of the money that I had and I invested in this program called LEAP. It was really a life insurance program, but it was called Lifetime Economic Acceleration Program. It was like $5K that I took, which you got to realize, I started my business at 15. I won $5K with the business. I won $1,500 with the business and made the money from the business. And I'm like taking half of it to get the software and to get a license and to start getting educated. And man, like I started to meet fantastic people and I started to learn things that I wouldn't have learned any other place. Getting your network and then like masterminds and education. So I really wanted to learn marketing. And so that's something I learned in my 20s. I really wanted to learn sales. So I went to, I bought programs, I read books, I went to events. I really wanted to learn business. I didn't know anything about business when it came down to it, other than the basics from having a car detailing business. But I didn't really know about hiring. I didn't really know about contracts. There was just so much. And so really just investing in those things, I decided pretty early on, like it wasn't really going to be about net worth in my 20s. It was going to be about my network. It was really going to be about my mental capital and it was going to be about my relationship capital. And a lot of people skip this. They're like, oh, the best thing you could do is save money to build your balance sheet, and the balance sheet just being your assets versus your liabilities, and say, how can you build your net worth? And so a lot of times the way people are building that net worth in their 20s is they're taught to sacrifice. But the problem is they sacrifice knowledge, right? They sacrifice skill sets. They sacrifice, the people that they could meet if they were to go to the right things, if they were to be introduced. I mean, in my 20s, when I did strategic coach, it taught me how to think. It taught me how to, grow my business, just skills that I didn't have. So I really feel like that's a big piece, because I just see all these videos. Man, if you just take $100 and for 40 years you put it in a ETF or some type of mutual fund or something like that, then you're going to have $1,100,000. And they're like almost saying like, just hold on to everything you got. Yeah. They're really saying that budgeting is going to be the key. And look, the first few years in my 20s, I did kind of follow that budgeting mindset and I had the slowest growth. It was really painful because I'm not saying to be reckless with money and spend every dollar that comes in. I'm just saying maybe look at other alternatives where you actually have a fund or an amount of money that you allocate towards your education. Because I think that the mistake some people make is they think education happens in a classroom. And sure, it does to a certain degree. But when I think about, Leap, which by the way, I just talked to the president of Leap, and he's going to have me speak at their event next year and paying me. And the founder of it is coming back for the first time in over a decade. So it's kind of like this really nostalgic moment for me that I was a kid watching VHS tapes in a VCR, learning this and going to these events all the time. And now they're saying, hey, will you come and keynote? See, that's what, because I really truly decided I'm going to invest in myself. And what that looked like for me in my 20s is I hired a speaking coach. I was a speaker. I just, monotone, nervous. I mean, I remember speaking once at this event, and Dennis Waitley, who wrote The Psychology of Winning, was in the audience, and I was reading notes. Another time I had a slideshow, and I had people like the guy that wrote Who Moved My Cheese, that I had read that book, and they had Stephen M.R. Covey in the room, and they had all these authors. I'd read their books, and I was nervous, and I was like, it's time to up my game. And so really getting a speaking coach. And then when I started writing, I hired writing coaches and went to courses for that. So yes, I started out with like business and marketing, and then I was like, what can I do to increase my skill sets? And then started to invest in myself. And so this is something that people can do in their 20s. But as I said to my son, is get really good at sales, because whether you're an artist or whether you're a business owner or whether you're an employee, I mean, almost anything, sales can help you out, because it's just, how do you effectively communicate?
Yeah.
That is something that I think gives him tons of upside potential. I'm like, he'll have to sell a woman on marrying him one day. He'll have to sell, it's something that comes in handy at almost every turn.
Yeah. Relationship capital, mental capital. Why is that so key? Because I feel like that's an element that not a lot of people talk about.
Yeah. A lot of people skip mental capital just to put money in an account, right?
Yeah.
They're like, okay, they think that wealth is something kind of outside of them in net worth.
Yes.
Right? That's how they believe in wealth. So they think the more money that I could put in these assets, the more I'll have. But a lot of times they're trying to put that money into an asset, but they're skipping their greatest asset, which is, I'm saying, put the money into you and then grow the assets. See, if you skip that step and go just straight to assets, you don't have the mental capital, the ideas, the knowledge, wisdom, the insights, the strategies, the tools, like increase your skills, the exponential skills that really matter. If you skip that and you're just building it, then you get into this notion of money's about scrimping and saving and sacrificing and deferring and delaying and discipline and all that. And then you have money, and let's just say that your money grows. But your knowledge doesn't.
Yeah.
Now, if that knowledge stays flat, then what happens is there's a gap between what you know and your net worth. And this gap right here, that's a risk. Because if you grow money, but you don't grow your knowledge, then ultimately you might not be able to keep that money. Because why might you not keep it? Well, you might get tax issues, right? You might have risk and volatility in a market you don't understand. You might not know how to create cash flow with it. You might have inflation come in and hurt that asset, or, not be able to keep up with it or to overcome it. You might just have market and economic conditions that you don't really have any exit strategies or any knowledge around. So I'm like, hey, in my 20s, what I did well is I put money into my mind.
Which comes first? Is it kind of the tail wags the dog kind of scenario of, do you have to have knowledge first to get money, or money first and then get knowledge? So
we have this conundrum here. There's a lot of people that don't have a lot of money, but they have time. Like, this was kind of me in college.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a ton of money, but I had time. So what did I do? I just went and interviewed as many bright minds as I could. I traveled monthly. I leveraged my young age to get access to these individuals that wanted to pay it forward. Yeah. And so I had more time than money. And so I really just took the time to build the relationship, to grow that connection. They liked it. I mean, my professors, I would meet with them quite often, became friends with them, had conversations outside of the classroom with them. It's funny. I remember one of my accounting professors saying, never, no matter what, do a partnership. I was like, what? That's crazy. I've had like really bad partnerships before. So I'm like, oh yeah, now I know what he's talking about. Right.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where someone's got more money. When you got more money, like, let's think about it. If you don't have a lot of money, but you've got time, well, you could buy books. You could go online and you can take courses. You could take Ivy League level courses for like $49 online right now. And there's with YouTube, you can get access to almost any information if you're willing to take the time to do it. Now, as you have money, then you can actually just hire the mentor, or you can go right to the author, for example. Like, you get access to shorten that time. So if you have more money than you have time, then what you're going to do is you're going to find ways to get that more accelerated, condensed way of learning, which is more personalized. But if you have more time than money, then you use the free resources. Like, people could go through, and like my buddy Dan Martell has SaaS Academy, and he's like, man, if they just went online and they took the time, they could pretty much find all the lessons. But those people that wanted to have the accelerated, like, show up to an event, meet people, like, they could get the access to information quicker by just paying for it. So that's what we have to look at. And I didn't have as much money when I was in my 20s early on, but as I got more money, well, then I went straight to the mentors. I hired the speaking coach directly. I hired the writing coach directly instead of just going to an event.
Yeah, because at first it sounds like $5,000 is a lot to hop into.
Especially 1998, $5,000, $3,000 to license in the program, $2,000 for the software. And then I actually decided to go and get training every single month while I was still in school from these programs. And sometimes that training was only $300 or $350. Sometimes it was, thousands of dollars for the 2 symposiums they did a year. But I immersed myself in it. And that really helped me at a very early age to get these appointments with people that were 20 years older than me and that had been in finance for much longer. But I was just courageous enough to have asked the questions sometimes at the events, which was like nerve-wracking, but that got the relationships built. And I just kept going, and I kept, meeting people and starting study groups. And, it's like the 20s is build your mind. But the mistake I kind of made in my 20s is I got caught in the grind.
Okay.
Where I didn't have a good filter for what to say yes to and what to say no to. Now I have this thing called the idea optimizer. You saw last week, I took someone through the idea optimizer with 2 competing ideas, and it was obvious which one for them to take and which one not to based upon that tool. That's just 10 questions. I had to create it because everything sounded like an opportunity, but what I didn't realize is saying yes to so many things. I was saying no to my health. During that time I started to gain weight. I was saying no to my wife. And she was getting super annoyed because I was gone all the time, and there was functions that were going on, and I just didn't even consider it. Like, I was just saying no to a lot of important things because I didn't have a good enough filter. And so I just thought, I'm going to work so hard now, and I'll make up for it later on. But you can't buy back the memories you don't have. So ultimately, being in the grind was the mistake. But what I did well was I definitely just dove in with mentors. And I definitely went to events, and I, met amazing people and built fantastic networks, and, everything from like go to the Wizard Academy before I launched my first book, helped me to think about how to market that book, or being in Genius Network, absolutely knew nothing about marketing. That revolutionized, and showed me things that I could do that I had no clue with. Like, the list goes on. I was in things, and I just looked at it as like, hey, I paid more than all 4 years of college for my first year out and on every single year. There was no year where I didn't invest at least $40,000 in my education. But the thing is, outside of school education is so personalized. I know exactly what I'm looking for. I'm going to go apply it in my business. So it gives me a much more accelerated result because the stakes are right there. It's like, I want to learn because I'm going to apply this. So when I was going, all right, I'm going to write this book, Killing Sacred Cows, and I want to launch this book, and I want it to be a New York Times bestseller. Didn't have any idea how to make it New York Times. So by speaking it and declaring it, people started to support me. I hired this guy, Michael, And then he introduced me to the Wizard Academy. And then everybody that was starting to read the book, I'm like, I'm looking to make a New York Times. So I was like, oh, you need to meet Joe Polish. He's really great. And he helped me meet a bunch of other people that moved a lot of books. And so like what happened is it became this amazing tool that allowed me to build relationships. But the reason I was able to write that book at an early age is because I was investing in my education from the time I was 19.
Yeah.
While I was still going to school. And so this is the thing, build yourself up before you have too many bills, before you have as much pressure. Build that foundation that you can increase your value. Don't just increase your value first. And then as a byproduct, that will increase your net worth.
Yeah.
But I think net worth can be detrimental for people because if they get addicted to building their net worth, they might not deploy the capital that would help them grow their value because they're so busy looking at these dots on a piece of paper that say they're worth some amount, right? It's like whatever that is. If it's like, $1 million, well, great. What if it makes sense to take 10% of that million to build a team, to start a business, to do something that might have a delay before you see the fruit, before it comes about?
Yeah, and a crucial part that I think is you're hitting on both mental capital and relationship capital. And myself growing up, I loved education, would find, ways and be willing to pay for a course or something, but I never really invested in community. Almost everything you hopped into at the beginning was really community-based communities. And kind of talk a little about like, what does it cost to get into those communities?
Yeah, and you might have to be resourceful depending on what your resources are. So like, there's just certain communities like mastermind talks, and I'm still paying to attend because Jason has curated the room. He's intentionally sitting you next to someone that you might be able to do something with or learn from, or there's some commonality because he does a robust intake form and he takes his time to think about like, how do I make this where it's not just about the lessons in the room, but it's the connections that are continuing. So you might go skeet shooting and you get to hang out with someone on the bus, or go fly fishing and you're having a conversation while you're at the river, and you're building these kind of memories while you're also building those relationships. And so that, mastermind talks, I think it's something like $12,500 when you go to the live event. It's usually a few days at a really nice place. You pay for the hotel, but they give you discounted amounts and they cover the food. When I was in Genius Network, I think it's more now, but at the time they actually called it 25K because it was 25K. Or when I did the Misfit Mastermind, that was at the Wizard Academy, and I think that was something like 25K or 20K. I've paid $7,500 just to have a one day with Roy Williams because he's so brilliant. And, that's like a bargain. That's super cheap to be able to have that one-on-one time with him. But there's courses at Wizard Academy that are only $2K for like a writing course that I took my son to last year, so it's extraordinarily affordable. There's housing on the campus. I've been in Maverick, which is, Yannick Silver's group. I believe that was like 18K for the year. So like I've continually been in these programs, and the one that I'm really going to get back into is Baby Bathwater. Hollis is someone that just really curates the room. I've met so many great people. I've learned tons of amazing things, and I've kind of taken a break and a hiatus from some of these things because when I was doing so much writing, I was taking a detour a couple of years ago to do comedy, then starting a new business. And so it's just been more like I did some personal work on me, like, going through, MDMA therapy type of stuff, and, just kind of doing family retreats and focusing on my family and what the next chapter of my life would be. But the foundation was built from these things I did in my 20s and even going into my 30s of like, when you have zero network, the great thing is you can buy into a network, and that'll get you in the room, but then you just got to be a value creator.
Yeah.
Right. Then you just got to say, how do I add value to and contribute to this community? And I've spoke at annual events for Genius Network where I'm teaching on relationships, even though that's not what I normally teach on, just because Joe thought it was great. And I'm going, how do I add value to the community? Because it will create conversations. And then I met people at those events that asked me to speak at their events. And then I speak at their, so it all kind of grows and evolves because of that. But I just feel like relationships, that's the gold. How do you build relationships? That's it's like so valuable to have great relationships in your life. You have inspiring conversations. You can tap into, resources where they'll make good connections for you, or maybe even promote you to their community because they love what you do. Or there's just like, there's 100 dimensions why relationships are great. I think that's the gold in life, is the connection with another human being.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel happiest, when I'm, in community and in connection. I think with AI, we're going to crave community even more now than ever. So when you have community, all of a sudden you can share stories, and not just the wins, you can share the lessons and the scars, and, you can learn from each other, and you can support one another. I feel good when I'm supporting someone, when I'm helping them out, when I'm able to contribute to them. And so, as we come here for Cash Cabin, you see, like, I feel really excited for those, and I really enjoy those, because I get to know someone really deeply. And the more deep you know someone, it's like, it just feels, the way I would describe it is, it's just like, it feels fun. It feels enjoyable. It feels connected. It feels valuable, where sometimes, I can learn from watching a video, which is great, but I just love being with a person, because I'm learning, and I'm kind of like, having that loving connection.
Like, how much money do you think you have made off of these connections?
Man, so let's just talk. When I got introduced to Joe, he got 2 different people to give my book to him in the same week. So we just got on the phone, and we did like an 1.5 hour phone call. So we talked for about 90 minutes, and he made some major connections for me in that. One, I'm now a trustee for, and they promoted me 12 times. Another one moved 1,000 books from the teleseminar that they did.
Wow.
Another one just hired me to coach them. Those were like 3 connections right away on that phone call. That pretty much easily paid for the $25K, but obviously I did it for years and years afterwards. But, Joe and I just have a great relationship now. I went and, had dinner with him last time I was in Arizona. He's a genuinely good human. When my mom had a kidney transplant, he was, making connections and seeing what he could do to help her out. So, like, that's really valuable, that not only can I learn from him, but there's just someone that I consider a friend. And so, yeah, sometimes I was in a fraternity, people say, oh, you're buying your friends. Well, sometimes you just pay, because what it does is it creates a certain level of standard that people are serious about what they're in, because they pay attention to that which they pay for. It curates them things. It makes a higher level of commitment. I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. I mean, what is money? It's a way that we utilize and tap into value. And one of the most valuable things are relationships and building relationship capital. You have the right catalysts in your life. There's so many catalysts in my life that promote and introduce and speak highly of, and that helps my brand to grow. That helps me to be able to connect with people, to deliver value. But if I wouldn't have been in these groups, I've learned so much from these great individuals. There's so much to learn from people. And I learn from books, but sometimes books, it's hard for me to retain. And I'm also wanting to personalize. So you get a bit of a shortcut if you could talk directly to an author.
Like, I've gone to tons of these free entrepreneurship help groups, and they were never helpful, because I was the only one who had actually done anything with the business, right? There was a lot of dreamers and things like that. And though there were great connections, there wasn't any catalyst, move forward with.
Yeah. And I find that when there's an application to join, and when they're curating the community and saying, hey, who's a values match and who adds to this? I mean, that's a pretty phenomenal situation, because, I remember really young, I went to this thing called SANG, Speakers and Authors Networking Group. And that room was filled with people I've read their books. I knew who they are. And I was young, and I had just come out with Killing Sacred Cows, and it was intimidating, but it was also inspiring.
Yeah.
And, to be able to learn from them. And everybody was talking about the reality of their business and what it was like to write a book and launch a book, and how they marketed the book, and the challenges they were facing in their business, or what worked and what didn't. And to be able to kind of hear that, and kind of behind the kimono, and, be, oh, this is really interesting, because it also has you feel like, okay, everybody goes through different, difficulties, and you learn how they problem solve. And then you also learn, like, oh, if I have this challenge, here's someone that can, help me out with that.
Connection. Yeah. I know from the outside, you appear to be an extrovert, but I don't believe that's the case.
I definitely really enjoy being around people, and then I like to recharge, like, a little bit on my own.
On your own, which would make you more of an introvert.
Yeah, it's interesting, because, when my really good friend Aaron lived here, we would work out every morning. And when he moved, it was like I started having my mornings to myself, and there was actually a lot of value in that.
Yeah.
I don't want that every day, but, even being up here at the cabin, I stayed here last night on my own, and it was fine, but I was like, oh, it'd be nice to have coffee with my wife this morning.
Yeah.
I enjoy people's company, but I can recharge just being on my own. Even when I go to these events, if they're multiple day events, I might take some time off and not go to one of the dinners one night and just hang out in my hotel room just to kind of, unplug for a minute. So yeah, I mean, you don't have to be an extrovert to make this work.
Thinking of yourself at the 20s, kind of, the awkward Garrett individual.
Oh, dude, Weston, I would go to some of the stuff and not know what to say.
Yeah.
Just be like uncomfortable, show up and be a fly on the wall. And then when I'd finally know someone and get introduced, I could kind of like find a way to, and I remember being nervous to go to some of these things in my 20s, but I grew from that. You have to do those uncomfortable things sometimes, because I felt like, this room's bigger than me, but that's what's great is I wasn't the smartest person in the room, right? I was like, wow, there's so much I could learn from everybody.
Any tips for an individual in their 20s? Let's say they get up the money, they buy into one of these communities, but they're a fly on the wall.
Yeah. So a couple of tips. One is just think for every day you're there, if you could meet one person and just go a little bit deeper with them. Because when I went to this thing back in the day, it was called CEO Space, and you do this like speed networking, and I get like 1,000 cards, and nothing happens from it.
Yeah.
So it's really about like meeting that person and connecting with them. And the way that I look at it is, how do I get to know them? How can I ask them questions? It's like the Stephen Covey thing of like, be interested before you try to be interesting.
Yeah.
And so just get to know them, and build the relationship with one person. Cause if you can't build 10 relationships in one day, that was the first thing, is I'd ask questions, focus that one person. And then 2, like, how could I add value? I just think, where am I going to be able to contribute? Where am I going to be able to add value and just really work to add that value? So the way I do that is I just figure out someone's currency, and their currency, that could be, they just like acknowledgement. It might be, like I'm talking like if I have an employee, they might like acknowledgement. They might not like flexibility in their schedule. They might like, it might just be that they really want money. It might be that they want safety. It might be that they want purpose. Like, you just kind of find out what someone's currency is, like what's important to them. So, when I first met Dan Sullivan, I realized his currency really was referrals, because he loves what he does. He loves teaching, and he wants to help like grow people that are out there that are entrepreneurs doing great things. So I was like, dude, I'm just going to become a massive referrer. And it was one of the ways that I could add value and then build that relationship.
Yeah.
So, think of the ways that you can add value, and then, so focus on a person, not everyone. Focus on what can you do to add value. And then 3, like, people love to help people. Just know what you're looking for. Know what you want. So if someone's like, hey, how can I help you? You're like, well, how would you, like, if I'm at one of those, I'm like, how would you market this? Or who do you know that has a community of people like that? Or I'm looking to hire here. Like, have those things ready so that they can actually help you. And if they can't, they might know someone who can. But most people go, how can I help you? Oh, I'm good. So yeah, add value, but then also be willing to receive value when people want to reciprocate, So those are kind of like that's my top 3 that I would recommend on how to enter one of those rooms.
Overcoming that. Yeah, that's great. You'd mentioned the idea optimizer. Do you think their 20s is the right time for that?
It's part of an entire process, a bigger process called the cycle of creation. So this will really tie everything together. Okay. Cycle of creation is, maybe you have an idea. How do you make that more formal? How do you make that more concrete?
Yeah.
Is you make it a concept. The way you make it a concept is use mental capital and relationship capital to move it along. You share it with someone else. You start documenting it. You brainstorm, right? Then how do you make it in from a concept to a framework? This is where a lot of people get stuck. Is instead of going from a concept to a framework, they go straight to how do I make it a product, a service, or an experience in the marketplace. And this straight line is called the grind. Right? If they go straight from concept to product. But if you create a framework's where there's delegation. Framework is where you can offload things, where you can have support. There's all those factors that are going to help you with your bandwidth and not getting dragged into doing too much on your own. Then with the framework, you can turn into a product, service, or experience. And again, we're using mental capital and relationship capital to move it along. And then after the first time we go through the cycle, you go back to how do we improve the idea and do a second cycle. But see, that first cycle is your MVP. It's your minimum viable product. And my whole philosophy in cycle of creation is, how do you pre-sell? How do you start to profit up front by generating revenue before borrowing money?
Yeah.
Like we had a call last night. It was with Matt and Jeff, two of my partners. And the entire call was, what's our fastest way to profitability in here before we start testing the really big ideas? And so we're like, what's the first cycle? Right? And then what's the second cycle and third cycle is what we start to add in when there's the cash flow to support it. And again, a lot of that comes in with mental and relationship capital to move it along. But the best thing is when you can have the very people that are using your services fund what you're up to. So when I did Killing Sacred Cows, we pre-sold 22,000 copies of the book. So we could actually build, better bonuses. And we already knew the book was going to be a hit because we had an advanced reader group and we're giving them resources. And so it created all this momentum. We did that through the cycle of creation. So the cycle of creation was that process where we went through, and this is what it looks like, Weston, so it starts with a balance sheet, assets versus liabilities. Maybe it's this Killing Sacred Cows launch. We're like, there's all these questions that we ask, what's valuable about this? How do we make it more valuable? What resources do we like? We're going through that, but then we're like, well, what are the liabilities? Right. And there's all these questions on that are, what are the expenses associated with this launch? Is there websites that have to be built? Is there team members? What are the printing costs? Right. So, and then what we do is we say, okay, how do we go to our resources? Our resources are, how do we capitalize our assets? How do we turn those assets from potential to production? And how do we address the liabilities so that they don't become so overwhelming that it would destroy the asset? So resourcefulness is key. That's where we tap into relationship capital. That's where we tap into existing frameworks. That's where we learn from other people. That's where we hire mentors. And then we look at these other questions where we're like, all right, on an income statement, how soon can this be profitable? Where can we get money up front that can help, with crowdsourcing this? What additional resources do we already have that could be added as bonuses that make this more valuable for them to buy today than, 6 months from now? So, and then we're like, well, what are the immediate expenses? And then we're looking at, when does this break even? And then when does this profit? Right? So there's all these questions here, but then let's say we have competing ideas. That's when we say, let's take it to the idea optimizer. The idea optimizer is 10 questions. How aligned is it with our vision? How easy is it to implement? How many people does it impact? Like, it's these questions that at the end we have a score. 100 would be a perfect score. And, I look at it like a grade. If it's at a 70, that's pretty average. If it's 60, it's a fail. So we can actually look and say, we have competing ideas, which ones to move forward with first, by having the questions that help us to think about these things before in the midst of the emotion, before we're stuck in the middle of like, okay, how do we fix this problem? It gets us to think ahead. And it's super helpful using this cycle of creation because it's got all these questions for assets, liabilities, resources, income, expenses, production, and the idea itself, which means we can start to develop it. And then there's these questions at the end that are the win then play questions. So win then play, I think I've now got 11. And those questions are saying, how can we profit from this idea up front? Who already would find this valuable? Who could we strategically partner with? It's all these questions that allow you to profit from day one, to be able to be, getting momentum immediately. And so when you're in the win then play, we've done that with a digital course, the very first one we ever created. We pre-sold $150,000 of the course before we filmed the first video. But we also told people 50% of what it's going to cost once it's done, because it's not going to be done when you pay for it. We want your feedback. We want your patience. If there's something broken, you let us know. And if you love it, you'll endorse it and tell other people about it. So we had like these 50% less because you're an early adopter. Once it's done, the price is they're going to go from $1,250 to $2,500. And, that got the $150,000, which allowed us to hire the camera crew, put in the TV studio, have all the editors. We ended up creating workbooks because that's what people are asking for. We ended up being able to hire a sales team. So it's like we were able to win first by saying, hey, we've designed it, and then we're going to have the end users tell us what to do. Where a lot of people, they borrow money to do that, right? And now they have to pay off the loan from the proceeds.
Yeah.
Right?
If
we just cut that out. We're like, hey, we are getting money straight from the user. And so when the program's finished, it's already paid for.
Yeah.
And we already know people want it instead of like building it and hoping that they want it.
Yep. Yep.
So, I mean, that's a lot of information right there, but that's the cycle of creation. And heck, we're happy to give people some of those tools and resources for free.
Why do you think these components are crucial to someone in their 20s?
I mean, how do we know what questions to ask? How do we know? Like, I feel like your money journey begins the day you lose your first dollar. You're like, oh, wait,
Yeah.
this is different than I thought. So in business, when we can be armed with questions that give us insight and foresight before we get into the emotion of it, it gives us real ability to navigate a lot more effectively. We won't be able to predict every problem. We'll just be able to minimize the impact of those in the future by being more deliberate and thoughtful. And, you know, it helps you to go slow to go fast. It helps you to, you know where you're at and what timing of things makes sense. It lets you focus on cash flow versus exhausting the resources to launch something.